Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm James Croft. I'm a doctoral candidate at the Harvard Graduate School of Education and a member of the Humanist graduate community here. And I first want to thank you for a couple of things. First, for making me extremely proud to be a graduate not only of Harvard, but also of the second most exciting place in the world, of Cambridge too. I'm very proud of that this evening. And also for introducing into this space not once, but twice the word fucking. And I feel that if I didn't take the opportunity to say it now, I probably would never get the opportunity to say it in here again. So thank you for that. CBS News in the year 2007 reported a recent Gallup poll which suggested that 43% of Americans would not vote for an otherwise qualified gay presidential candidate, but a whopping 53% of Americans would not vote for an otherwise qualified atheist presidential candidate. So I guess I'm wondering, how do you feel to combine in yourself two of the least electable qualities in one person, as I do myself? And is there any other connections other than the ones you've already spoken about between your humanism and your homosexuality?
Do you know what? I'm a Jew too. Go on.
There's truly no hope for you.
It's an odd thing. A friend of mine recalled, I don't believe this, that when I was at university once at some dinner, I got very drunk. I was the senior member of a drinking club called the Cherubs, and I'd got slightly out of control. And he claims I stood on the table and said, "God knows if I weren't queer and I weren't a Jew, I'd be such a fascist." And I don't know. It's easy for me to be so-called on the side of the oppressed, to be on the side of tolerance and plurality and human biodiversity, to be on the side of victims, to be on the side of the underdog, because I, belong to a nice sort of selection of minorities who there are few people I admire more, if you like, than the well-born WASP, who is totally on the side of the underdog, because they've got less personal reason. They've worked it out for themselves. I was given it. I was given a good reason to fight for underdogs, if you like. I don't know. I mean, a lot of it is heroes. I think the best of us in life, I've always felt, have heroes, and they can be sporting heroes, they can be cinematic heroes, they can be musical heroes, they can be intellectual heroes, and they can be a mixture of all those things. Sometimes it's almost just a voice. When I was very young, I saw this man being interviewed on television in black and white on a big sort of terrible old television, and I remember saying to my mother, "Mummy, who's that?" His voice absolutely entranced me. And she said, "Oh, that's Bertrand Russell." English television was the kind of television where you'd see a philosopher on children's television time. And he was talking about nuclear power and the bomb. And they were asking him, the journalists were saying, and so, Lord Russell, you disapprove of it for this reason. He said, no, I disapprove of it because it is wicked. And I remember thinking that the confidence, the clear bell of his voice was so beautiful and so extraordinary. And I read some of his books with very little understanding. He was, but he wrote a general sort of history of philosophy, which is anybody can understand. But also he wrote about how his atheism grew and how he shaved off all the reasons to be religious that had been inculcated on him since childhood. He grew up in a normally sort of religious household, a rather aristocratic one as it happens, but otherwise normally religious. And by the time I was 18, I had divested myself of the last of the dogmas and felt myself to be free. That's how he put it. And that mattered to me enormously. And then there are, if you like, anti-heroes. There are things you hear that crystallize every reason you have. And I won't mention the name of the Australian film star, whose name rhymes with Gel Mibson, but I remember when he was just starting out, I remember seeing him being interviewed, and he was asked about whether he whether he believed in life after death. And he said, well, I'll tell you one thing. There's got to be more than this. And I'm really thinking, what? You are dissatisfied with this planet and this life? You are dissatisfied with the continents and the oceans and the mountains and the flowers and the animals. You are dissatisfied with your fellow human beings. You have a sense that this is just, this is not enough. I'm sorry, there's got to be more to it than this. You're not only saying that as a human being, you're saying that as a fucking film star. You can get all the sex you can eat. You can buy anything, you can have anything, you can do anything, but it's pretty obvious that there's got to be more to it than this. What the hell are you talking about? And that crystallized in me the absolute urgency of understanding that not only is this all that there is, but that it's wonderful that it's all that there is, and that there's absolutely nothing I'm missing. Now, Benjamin Franklin, one of your finer citizens, was responsible for a favorite quotation of mine. Beer is God's way of saying that he loves us and wants us to be happy. It's really a marvelous phrase, isn't it? And any atheist can groove to that particular beat. I would possibly add cheese to that if I'd been born into this planet and there hadn't been the oddity of a cow or a sheep or a goat's proteinaceous exudations from their tits being somehow fermented into a hard or semi-hard curd, it's unlikely that I would have said, wait a second, this planet is deuced second class. I demand a proteinaceous exudation from the tit of a goat or a sheep that I can spread on my crackers and eat with grapes. We wouldn't have missed it. We wouldn't have noticed it wasn't there, and yet it is there, and how supremely perfect that it should be there. There's it's getting slightly off text here, but there's one of the things I think people forget about Darwin is that Darwin didn't shock people because he said we were descended from apes. He didn't. I think really what shocked people, and what ought to shock people, it's a bit like the famous Niels Bohr thing about quantum mechanics, If you're not shocked by quantum mechanics, then you haven't understood it properly. And if you're not shocked by Darwinism, then you haven't understood it properly. Because the thing it really says is that nature is supremely indifferent to us. It's one thing to say we were descended from apes. I dare say someone with a religious view of a benevolent God could factor that into their calculations. But it's the fact that the universe is so unremittingly cruel that nature, most animals are in a constant state of starvation and stress. They're constantly fighting for the right to mate, fighting to eat, fighting to flee their predators, or fighting to eat the animal that is necessary for their own survival. They're in a constant state of misery. And not only that, there are some species that are so horrific. There are types of wasp whose own life is to be born inside some other animal and to eat it from the inside. That's what nature does. It fills a niche, and the niches are often fantastically ugly, fantastically unpleasant. So when someone tells you there must be a God because the world is so beautiful, they have to understand these parasitic wasps. They have to understand a little baby lamb having its head bitten off by a wolf. They have to factor that in. It's a very extraordinary universe we live in, and it's a very beautiful one. And it is appalling to think that you would need to believe in a notional creator in order to respond to it spiritually, to respond to its beauty, to marvel, to wonder at it. Perhaps the greatest quality humans have, really, is the ability to marvel. After all, this is the only planet we know. The sun is the only source of light from nature and heat that we know. And we know it lifts or seems to lift above the horizon every morning. We know no other sun. We know no other earth. And yet, we're astonished by it. And every day, we see a sunrise or a sunset, and we go, my God, isn't that amazing? How can it be amazing? It's not as if we come from another planet where there isn't a sun. So, oh, I'm visiting Earth, and I have to say, I'm jolly impressed. This is what Wittgenstein called the case. It's all we know and ever have known, and yet we are capable of marveling at it. And that's something we should never lose. Thank you. Does that answer your question? I doubt it.
Whether it does or not.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, of course.